Okay, here is the final lineup of the IF can before I'm going to reassemble all the parts. Now, as you can see, I prepared every part. I cleaned it as best as I could, grinding off with a tiny little grinding tip this end. Wait. Yeah. So I grinded every part of this holder. Yeah, this little cup. This cup holds the IF coil like this, or well, like this, if you prefer, to the base. So this tiny little piece goes inside this metal clip. Then both of these parts, this cup and the clip, go on top of this square little piece. And then these three parts, in the end, these three go on top of this. Now, before I can mount these parts on this base, I need to mount the little feet back into the base. Now, it doesn't matter whether I mount it now or later, because sooner or later I will have to mount capacitors to this assembly. And well, I can't obviously put capacitors back under this plate, so I will have to mount them on top, right next to the IF coil. So like I said, it doesn't really matter whether I reassemble it now or later. The capacitors I will use, instead of the ones which were under the base, will be mounted on top. Now, I need to sort of assemble all my courage to do the same thing with the other IF can, because, well, I'll say it again, this is not for the faint-hearted. If you don't dare to do this, then you might perhaps have more success by attaching a capacitor to the pins that are exposed and hope that the ones which are under this plate won't throw your capacitors off. But, well, I did this partly because I was curious to see how it was assembled, and also to see whether I could push myself to go a step beyond and fix something which seems at first sight. I unmounted the second IF can from the Motorola chassis, because as you know, I think I explained last time in the other video that Motorola apparently mounted two mica capacitors inside the base of these IF cans. And by inside, I mean, if you take a look at the foot of the other IF can I repaired, is in between the plate on top and the base of the IF can, there is a tiny sliver of a space, just enough to put in two mica capacitors, I imagine of a few picofarad. Now, the problem is, if I leave those capacitors in, and I would mount new capacitors in parallel with the pins, just as those miniature mica capacitors would be mounted, it wouldn't do any good because they are silver plated mica capacitors, and in my opinion after a while they would start to short out. So whether you like it or not, if you're confronted with IF cans of this type, you will either have to find new old stock or unmount the existing ones and disassemble them to take out those mica capacitors. Now, I think even if you found new old stock, you would still be confronted with the same problem, because they are silver coated. Silver starts to oxidize after a while, and well, ultimately it would give you just the same problem, exactly the same problem. So what I intend to do is to disassemble this second IF can and show you how I go about taking out those mica capacitors. Reassembling this IF can is really doing the same thing, the same actions as disassembling it, but in reverse order. So I won't bother showing you all the tedious steps of remounting it into one, but I will show you, because I think it might interest you, how to disassemble those mica capacitors. Now mind you, the method I use is of course my method. If you find another method or even a better method, then please do so. I try to keep destruction to a minimum, but inevitably you will have to cut here and there, and one of the things that you will have to cut, let's say, is that rivet which holds the base mounted parts together. You know, this copper colored brass rivet. Okay, so give me a moment to set up everything and to undo the can itself, and then we'll get started. Oh, by the way, if you want to pull off this can from the base, you can see there are tiny little nicks in the four corners. So this is where the aluminum of the can was folded over the base to hold it tight to the base. So what you need to do is with duckbill pliers like these pliers, so with no ribs, no pattern inside, just flat steel, you bend those little tabs back out so that you can slide the housing easily off the base. Mark on the housing and on the base to indicate in which direction the housing was slid on the base before I pulled it off completely. Now you'll notice that between this IF can base and this one, there is one big difference. Namely, on this base, the one I just pulled out, there are 3 pins instead of 2. Now the middle pin doesn't seem to be connected to any of the wires of the IF coils. So either it has no function except keeping the base tightly connected to the PCB, which you see in the background, or it might play a role with the capacitors underneath this base plate. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see until I unmount it. Now, there is one thing I want to mention. What I'm going to do, namely unmounting this whole, or disassembling this whole IF coil assembly, I will do with a mini drill. Now, I suppose some of you might not have the luxury of a mini drill, and in that case you might try using a thin nail file and a common household drill. But if you do, fine, but you'll have to be careful, because this base seems reasonably solid but is really very brittle. So if you apply too much force, namely with a household drill, for example, you might easily break it. So I would say fine, use a household drill if you don't have anything else, but use caution and as little force as possible. To start off with, as you can see, the coil is mounted on the base via a small cup, a small brass cup, and you can see the wires of the coil. Well, I hope you can see them. They are extremely thin and very, very breakable. So you really need to be extremely careful on mounting this coil assembly. Now, I've learned with the other IF coil assembly that this tube which holds the coils really is just clamped inside the cup, so it's sufficient to pull it out. Excuse me. To pull it out. But of course, you can't just pull it out right now. You need to undo these wires. Now, I could unsolder them, but like I said, they are very brittle, and they probably, well, it wouldn't go very well to unsolder them and all that. So what I'm going to do actually is, by using a tiny grinding wheel like this, and I'm going, or by using this grinder wheel, I'm going to cut the little tabs which you see here. You see the little tabs here, and I'm going to cut them with the help of a little grinding wheel at the end of my mini drill. So before I do that, of course, I should mark the spot where each of those contacts are attached to, because once I cut it, there's no way of knowing where they are attached. So I use a blue and a red marker to mark the spots. So I will say for the lower coil, I will use a red dot on one end and a red stripe on the other. There you go. So now I will mark the same thing on the foot, on the base of the IF can. So a small dot there and a small stripe for the other one there. Now for the other coil I will use a blue marker, and let's say I will put, let me see, yeah, Okay, I will put 2 stripes on one end like this and 1 stripe for the other here, and I will put 2 stripes here and 1 stripe here like this. That should do. Okay, so it's important, of course, that you mark those spots first before you start cutting, obviously. So now we're done. So now let's start grinding. Okay, that's one. That's two. Hang on, I need to check something. Okay, red and blue. Okay. Yeah, I marked them that way, but okay. Oh well, okay, it'll do. Fine. So I grinded loose 2 of them. So now let's grind the other 2. Oh, okay. I see. I cut loose 1 of the red and 1 of the blue. Oh, okay. I can live with that. Okay, so now let's grind the other 2. Okay. Now the final one. Yep. We're done. So I cut all the contacts. So now all I need to do is grab some pliers like this and then gently pull loose the tube assembly, which I keep in a small holder back here. in a small holder like this, so that it can't roll away or slide away. And there you have it. This is the base. So what I'll need to do now in order to unmount it, is to take a ball grinder like this, and in essence what I'm going to do rather, is I'm going to apply this ball grinder inside the rivet like this, and I'm going to use friction heat to heat up the rivet and push it through the base, which is about 3 mil thick. So by using friction heat I will be able to push the rivet all the way through the base, and that's what I'm going to do. So give me a moment, and oh well, maybe I'll show you. It won't take that long, I think. It's a little bit messier than grinding with the wheel, but it is necessary. Now mind you, you can do the same by using a drill bit and a regular drill and drilling out the rivet. I guess you could give it a try, and it might even work, who knows. But like I said, it's rather brittle, and I'm afraid if you're going to try that with a normal drill and a drill bit, you might actually break the base. So I'm going to do it with my method. So here we go. Nearly there. Well, typical. Just when it gets interesting, the battery of the camera ran out. But okay, I attached it to the loader, so that should be okay. So anyway, here we are. We're almost there. We're almost at the point where the rivet and the cover plate are going to let loose. Now remember, I'm using friction heat to push the rivet through the plastic of the base. So let's give it a last go. Okay, that should do it. Maybe not quite. Okay, I'll have to apply a little bit more heat. Well, of course I need to keep a good grip on it, obviously. Okay.
He'll have to improve as a hunter if he's going to grow into a 6-meter giant.
Not quite. Okay. Okay. mind you, it's turning out a bit harder than I thought. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Well, obviously, if you friction heat it, it is going to be hot. There you go. Okay. So as you can see, this is the base with the pins worked free. Let's see if I can zoom in. So you can see these are the pins to which are attached or which are the contacts for the capacitors. Now the capacitors are covered on top with this little mica plate. I hope you can see it. It's very transparent, and at the back of the cover plate there are the capacitors. You see, this little mica plate consists of two capacitors which are mounted in parallel with the coils. So what I need to do now is to get this plate off from the cover plate, which looks easy, but let me see, it looks easy, but it really isn't. I suppose I could break it, but I'm not going to, because I'm curious. So what I'm going to do is take away the ball grinder and put the normal grinding wheel back, and I'm going to grind away the end tab of the little cup. Okay, here we go. Okay, there we go. So now I should be able to lift the mica off. Yeah, there we go. There you go. This is the other part. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll give you a better view in a second. So
100 years underwater has created something very, very special.
okay. So there we go. So this is the little cup. This is the little cup which holds the IF coil. And these are the little mica capacitors which were clamped under this cover. Yeah, at the back of it. And these little mica plates are all that represents those capacitors. So that is what we are ultimately going to replace by classical, and by classical I mean by ceramic, tiny ceramic capacitors. So that's it for disassembling an IF can. I hope you enjoyed this part, and we'll continue soon with another update of refurbishing the Motorola 5T 13P. Thanks for watching.